Good morning, Bookus. How you doing this morning? And Bird Fan, how you doing? Getting going here. Well, today I'm going to work a little bit on some plugin stuff, but before I begin, it's been a couple somber days here in Southern California. We had a loss of Kobe Bryant in a helicopter crash with his daughter and some other people. There was 9 people in all in the helicopter crash, so kind of a little bit of a somber time here in Southern California. He was such a hero to so many people, and yeah, it's a big loss. Not just to the sports community, but just a general good person. So, but from all of us, from all of us here, just want to, prayers to the family and all the friends of the Bryant family and the others that lost their lives. Yeah, you're right. We're all affected. Boy, what a global thing, I tell you. It's just crazy. But, well, okay. So, with that said, and man, like I said, the news has been all about it for a couple days, and it's just been crazy. It's been crazy. But yeah, it's amazing how the world kind of comes together, because here we were just a couple days ago all talking about impeachment and 100 other things on the table on the news and everything else, and then all of a sudden some tragedy happens like this, and next thing you know, everybody in the world's all on the same side. Different countries that we probably hadn't spoken to in a while all talking together, and it's amazing. I guess there's a silver lining on everything, right? But wow. Oh, it would be a loss to the sporting community for sure, and many others. But okay, well, let's see. What do we got to do today? I know the coronavirus, another big thing going on. 100 lives already, so many more exposed to it. Even in the USA, they're tracking different places that people have come in from different countries, and oh my gosh, and I feel sorry for all those people in China that have, been quarantined, and man, there's so much stuff going on in the world today, huh? Yeah, just so sad, and yeah, scary too. Hope they get the help they need. Hope they find a vaccine really quick that helps people. Yeah, that's just crazy. All the things going on, we try to remember about life, huh? We do things like this, virtual worlds and stuff, and just try to forget about life, and then all of a sudden something like that just reels us right back. But okay. So what am I doing today? I'm going to continue on working on. There's a couple things. I created this plugin. I know sometimes when I lower it and raise it again, there it goes back to the black in the background. But I created a plugin. I've created a number of hooks and things like that. Well, in other plugins that I was working on, I added a couple more sections. So I kind of want to add them to here so that we have all the different pieces in place. But before I do that, let me just kind of walk you through a couple things in the code. First of all, when you get this plugin, I've created a page on my www site. Let me see what it is. See how easy it is to find by seeing if I can find it, right? Okay, support. I think it's in my 3D browsing stuff here. Now that's a certain section of it. Go under wiki. I'll make this more prominent. I think I even included it in the plugin page so you can see what we're doing, but we have 3D plugin development and the template page. I'll have to reorder those. But on here, it gives you a certain set of things to do when you want to create a plugin. The first thing you need to do is you need to get a developer ID. I didn't write a page to do this yet, so at the beginning we're going to be free for all, but keep it nice. Don't use WTW, that's mine. But basically it's going to be your ID if any plugins that you create, so that we know it's you, and also that you can create variables without conflicting with other people's variables. That's basically what it's all about. Your class names, your global variable names, anything like that you do, they'll all use this dev ID in it, so that basically they're yours and nobody else messes them up by creating another plugin that gets used on the server. Okay, so you get the dev ID. Then the other thing is, see how I have this, you use your dev ID and then the plugin template, that's the name of your plugin, whatever you're calling it. So in my case where I created, paintball, that was the name of my plugin, but I created WTW as my dev ID. I would have replaced WTW_paintball, all in caps. Then on this one, I would replace this name with no underscore, all lowercase, with my WTW paintball, all lowercase. Then this one, and there's a reason for doing 3 of them, I'll show you in just a minute, would be WTW all lowercase, hyphen, and then all lowercase the plugin name. Now the reason I did that is because there's actually 3 core pieces in here. First of all, there's the name of the class, which is used here. There's the name, or actually it's the name of the plugin is one of them. Then the next one is the name of the class. So like if I bring open main class for JavaScript, the underscore one is the name of the function that you basically add your JavaScript to. Then the one without a hyphen or underscore is the class name that gets called when it creates an instance of that class. So just trust me, it works. And then I give you, some layouts of how to do different things in here, some samples, some text telling you what you can do with it, and how you can check things and use them. The same thing goes for the plugin class. This particular one, we have the name of the class, which is PHP class. Then we have the instance, which is actually the exact same name. See, in PHP we can get away with that. In JavaScript it causes a little bit of issue, so I had to make sure that they ran both ways. But that kind of is the reason why we have those 3 different pieces that we use to do a search and replace across all of this. Now in the core file, yes I did put it in here. Okay, so in the core file, when you first create your plugin, this main file right here, dev plugin template, what we have is that's the link back to that text page telling you here's the instructions, and I'll keep adding to this for the documentation of different things you can do in the plugins. Okay. The next piece is, I do say it right here, search and replace the following with your dev and plugin name, and I do it right here. So I remind you right in this file, so you can set your plugin name there, you can put your title of what you want it to say, description, whoever the author is, and your version. And then I put a couple notes in here. So that pretty much gives you a couple different pieces so you can use them all. And then everything should work from there on out. That will replace the name of the actual plugin folder, and the name of this file need to be changed. That's what you need to do, and once those pieces are in place, then the plugin will work as your own. So that's how you start up a new plugin and get your own thing going on there and stuff. Okay, so where do we go from there? Here's the deal. Let me break this down, and we have a couple things in the script. See, everything that's done by the gaming engine is actually done in JavaScript. So if I go back to my core code, WalkTheWeb code, what we have is, under scripts, we have a number of different sections. Each one is a core component for working in WalkTheWeb. Everything, all the JavaScript is what creates, uses the Babylon engine and, interacts with it and tells you what to create and stuff. But the first thing you do, whenever you go to Babylon, like if I just go to open Babylon here, babylonjs.com. If I go to, they have all that stuff up there, but if we go to tutorials, for example, the first thing you do is how do you get it, how do you install it, basic elements. So the basic elements are creating things like box, sphere, plane, the ground, working with different things. These items here are your meshes. Now in our code, what I did was I took the meshes and I wrapped them in a name called mold, because meshes are something you're currently using in a scene, where a mold is something that is the container for the mesh. It includes the mesh, but it includes a lot more data of like when it'll load, if you walk with, which action zone it's in to do it and stuff. We'll get to all that stuff. Don't worry about it. But basically, the molds are the meshes. They define the meshes. So if I look in this folder, for example, basic molds, you can start with a box. This function right here tells it we've got a side orientation, and then we have Babylon Mesh Builder Create Box. Well, same thing. If you go to this site, Babylon Mesh Builder Create Box. There's all the settings you can use and everything else. This is the basis of creating just a standard box, same way we do a sphere, a plane, and ground, for example. Well, in our code, in this basic molds file, you're going to see a box, a cylinder, a cone, a polygon, a sphere. That was the sphere definition right there. There's some other things, like I created a triangle and I created a torus and plane, and there's everything in here, including the terrain. There's terrain. Terrain would be your ground. That uses a height map and does all kinds of cool stuff. But each one of these pieces have just definitions of different things I've created that are useful for us to creating things. But notice it is just straight Babylon code. The only difference is that I assign it a name, a mold, and I return at the end of these files, no matter which one you pick, I do a return of that mold. Then after it completes creating the object, then some of them require it to put a texture on it, or a coloring or anything else. It defines what to do next after that. So in this case, add mold. First of all, here's our mold list. This is the list that it shows in our application. So if I go into here, I'm in a community right now, so we're going to edit the community, and if I say add 3D block, there's the list that it creates of all those different objects. Right here, in order, that's what we're creating. We have a second one. Web mold list is, instead of the basic building blocks, we have the web molds, which are just a little bit more complex builds. That's all it is. I separated like a box and sphere and stuff from things like smoke and particle showers and candle flames and light bulbs and other things that require more coding and different things. But technically, they're all meshes. They're all in the basic molds. Each one of them are defined in basic molds. If you go down far enough here, we're going to see some that, for example, here's a tree. Another one, the light bulb is right in this section. So each one of them are here. That produces the list. Then when you select and tell it to add one, it uses this add mold function. We give it a name and we use this definition, which is an object. We'll get to that in a minute. What parent we're going to parent it to, and also what covering we're putting on it. That's also in the mold def, each one of these things, but it was easier to separate it here than to separate it each time because I already separated before we even call this function. Okay, so walking around through this, got a little bit more here, but add mold, we do a couple things with figuring out some distances and sizes and stuff, and then it comes down to this switch and it asks for that shape. This shape is basically the same as the mold name, all lowercase, no spaces. So rounded space box, which was a capital R and a capital B, is now rounded box, for example. And then all I did was tell it, if I create, for example, a box, and that's the shape I want, use add mold box. We go back to basic shapes, right at the top of our file here, add mold box. That's the function that we called. It is saying return mold, but it's basically create box function, and I do the scaling right then too. So once it returns this mold, we have a cube on our screen. It's already been drawn. Then we go down here, and the next important part is we do this process called complete mold. When we complete the mold, which I've got down just a little farther here, there's some parts I was working on for some physics and stuff, but complete mold, we pass this information to here, and then we add all the other properties to the mold. For example, are we checking collisions? Is it pickable in our scene? By pickable, well, collisions, obviously, the guy isn't going to run through it. He isn't going to be able to pass through it. It's going to stop him. But as for pickable, notice how when I'm put the cursor on this road, for example, and the curb and the ground here, and even the ground out here, and the mountains or hills, but when I'm in the sky, it's not a picked hand cursor. Basically, the sky is not pickable. These items in here are. Also, they're pickable because we're in admin mode. If we weren't in admin mode right now, we wouldn't be able to pick them because we would only be able to pick things that have a click object, like an on-click assigned to it. Okay, so just so you know, there's a difference between browsing and all the extra stuff we add when we do admin. Which also means you may need a little bit more powerful computer to do the admin and build things and stuff, but at the same time, it's really cool because the browsing part is like the streamlined, anything just what you need when you're browsing, and none of these extra tools for building sites are loaded at that time. But in admin, all the browsing stuff, it's the exact same scripts that you're seeing that create the scene. So there's no difference in what you see in the scene, of how it looks and everything, to when you browse it in the browse mode, from admin to browse mode, because it is the exact same scripts generating the scene. The only thing is we add additional functionality, like make everything pickable when you're in admin mode. That kind of stuff gets added using the admin scripts. Okay, so we complete the mold. We have check collisions. We have different pieces here. One of the things I want to show you is this. We have name part, and the name is actually, I have this in the plugin directory here. I'll go to my object, 3D object naming scheme. This is kind of important. This goes along with pretty much with the directories of these folders here. This is the type of objects that we have. We have action zones. We also have connecting grids, which there's no folder because we work with them as part of the core. That's like putting pins where you're going to put something on a map. But so we have the molds, we have the coverings, we have avatars. Most of these automations, we'll get to that later, but that's a way to time a sequence of actions. It's about timing multiple actions together, animations or whatever you want to do. Okay, and prime is the core code that makes the scene come together and runs, has all of our stuff like cameras and core. Core starts up the scene. Constructor, by the way, there's two files in here that are very important to everything we do. First of all, the constructor, here's all of our global variables. It's capital WTW dot and then the name of this variable, and you can read these at any time. So you can use them in your code. For example, if you want to know how to init the scene with the starting position of where the users, the avatars come into the scene, this stuff all gets pulled and updated from the database. So these aren't the values, but they're the default values until they get set. Here's the sky values if they didn't get set. On down through here, there's each one of these are different arrays. Here's all the community molds. We have one for building molds. We have one for thing molds. We have one for everything. So we have our communities, we have our buildings, we have our things, we have automations, action zones, complete mold lists of different things. There's events, which are our animations. There's a bunch of stuff in here. My avatar is always my current avatar that I'm running in the scene, so you can grab that, get the name from it, or whatever else you need. Main parent is the parent of the scene, so if you need to parent things to it in a scene, you can use that. We have everything from the sun and the sunlight, which casts shadows. We have our different cameras. Current mouse positions. We have the size of the screen, size X and size Y, for the viewport. We have the mouse values of where you're currently moving your mouse on the screen. If you're dragging something, you'll get the mouse movements. You'll have a start position and then where it's moved to. You can mouse over and mouse out. There's a bunch of things in here that are very useful, but that's where you get. So constructor has all those global variables. It's just instead of the letters this, notice right at the bottom, WTW is this function. It becomes WTW dot, and then the name of the item is the complete, thing for all the different global variables. Now, on top of that, we have object definitions. This is very important because what you'll see is throughout the code, you'll have like wtw.newMoldEvent. What it does is it initializes the array of values for a mold event, for an animation. So if you want to know what variables you can use or what you can find in that array, all you have to do is look in this one file, object definitions, and you can see exactly what's created by each one of the objects when it loads. So great place to find out, hey, like we have a speed ratio, for example. If I want the animation to run twice as fast, change that to 2, or I can do 1.15 or something just to speed it up a little bit. But that adjusts the animations. If the animation loops, here's the start and end frames. So whatever we have that we load up as an animation, it may start on 1 and end on 250 frames in the animation, for example.
Hello, my name is Ryan Lord.
We have the name of the item that is being animated, or if it's a skeleton, it'll be blank because it'll find the skeleton by itself. Or if it's an assembly of a bunch of objects in the animation, it'll find each individual object in the animation, so you don't have to worry about those parts. There can also be mold events. For example, I can set something that on click, it does an action. For example, I have a desk. If you click on the drawer, it'll open the drawer for you. So that triggers an animation to make something move when you click it. I can click the drawer again and it'll close. So I have different things that I can set up that way. We can tie sounds to anything we do. So that stuff's all here. But there's more. There's an object animation. Mold queue. We queue things because if we push too many things to there at once, you may get a lag, you may get some weird stuff. So basically I have a queue. There's uploaded files. There's connecting grids, which are our pinpoints of where everything's located and how they are oriented to each other. So like if I put a building into a scene, I can use the connecting grid to rotate it, scale it, and position it in the scene. Action zones, we've talked about those, but basically when I walk near a door, I make it open. It triggers an animation to open the door. If I walk into an area, I may trigger what needs to load as I get closer to it. So that kind of stuff. Here are my new molds. New molds are basically, here's the definition, gives you the position, scaling, rotation. CSG is the, if you're cutting one object out of another, for example, or combining two objects as one object. That kind of stuff can all be taken care of here. There's all kinds of graphics, definitions of what graphic to put on it, and colors and paths, and anything required for a mold. Each one of those are defined here. We have path points. We have the avatar def, tells us all the things we know about an avatar and what they're doing currently in a scene. All that stuff is here. You can find each one of those pieces. Okay, so now that I've told you a little bit about what to find, now what happens is each one of these pieces, for example, custom molds, if I bring open a custom mold, I can create my own mold, call this function anything I want, add mold, and then whatever I want to call it. You're using your ID in front of it, so I'm not worried what you call it. It'll be your unique one for your particular class, so you can call it anything you want. Notice I have this on the end here. By the way, the logging, this will write to the file anything that causes an error in your code. It also helps trigger different things. Actually, this particular one goes to the console logs, so you'll be able to see exactly plugins, the name of your plugin, scripts, custom molds. It tells you what page it's on, and then which function caused the error. So you can track down very quickly where the error is coming from. And then since it gives you the message, many times the message will tell you what the error is, sometimes even tell you what line number caused the error or something, but that's all right here. The next thing is when you create your custom mold. So I come in here and say, hey, I want to create, for example, a box. Well, if I add something else, let's say I'm building a snowman as a custom mold. I would take 3 different spheres and combine them together. Well, instead of trying to make 3 spheres and everything else and then how they all connect and all this other stuff, what I would do is I'd build the item here, but then I would set it to, in this case, a mold that is a hidden object, and this one is a 1 by 1 by 1 cube. So I've scaled it to whatever size I scale this. I make my snowman, for example, to be scaled to that, parented, that be the parent of it. So it's a child object of it. All you have to do is, I even put it here as an example, is this line right here. Whatever object you create, dot parent equals mold. Then what happens is, as I add the object to the, as you add the objects into the scene and your snowman gets added to a scene, when I want to get rid of it because you walk so far away, I take anything that's a child object of this mold, which happens to be the same name, then basically it will get rid of all the child objects and clear it out of the scene in the same way. So parenting is very important. The other piece is when you name your objects, use mold name, which is the core name of the item that you're adding, as the beginning of whatever part you're adding. So if I was doing snowman, I may say the name of the bottom, the lower sphere is mold name plus, and then in quotes, hyphen, whatever name I want to call it. So I could say WTW lower snowball, or whatever I want to call it. Then the next one would be mold name plus, and then in quotes, hyphen, WTW, and middle snowball. So you get the idea. Name your objects using this mold name as the core reference to it. That also helps in the cleanup process. So if anybody creates something and you walk away, it helps me identify that that was orphaned and it can be deleted separately because that particular item is no longer in the scene. So it's a good way to check up on that and make sure it works. You can also do the same thing with your materials and meshes, meshes or materials. So I tend to use, MAT in the name just so I know it's a material, but do your own naming schemes. I'm fine with that. You can add more hyphens if there's other parts of this word that you want to be able to section out and call. Like I have some things where I wanted to cover a hover over. So what I did was when I moved the mouse over it, I change a word in the name saying it's being hovered on, and then I show a different image. But I can tell at any time what state it is by, if it's a hover, I can tell it, hey, if your mouse is over it, then I can tell it to do something. If it's not, then I can tell it to do something else. I show a different image. So I created hover overs doing that. But that's just by adding additional pieces, so like a hyphen and then whatever you want to do. So that's a bit of the stuff about that. But create your names, parent them to this object is the best cleanup process. You can do anything you want. Well, see, remember, here's the deal. As long as you parent with it, then when you add it into another scene, it's where it belongs. Because if you created something and you said, hey, I want it to be 10x, direction off center, and 0's 0, so it's on the ground. If you're working in a scene and you look at it, everything will look perfect if you're creating a building, for example. But now all of a sudden I put that building inside of a scene and it's not at 0, 0, 0 reference. What'll happen, and it could be rotated, it could be anything, scaled, whatever. Now it's out of place and it's sitting in off the reference of the scene, not off the reference of the building. So that's why the parenting is very important when you're creating things. Now, besides creating the actual item, we have this particular piece here, and we have, we even put a covering of hidden on it, but you can create anything you want. In this section, I also set the alpha, which is the transparency, to 0. Between those two items, hidden makes sure that it doesn't try to add a different covering to it by default. I do a lot of cleanup in the scenes. But in this case, alpha is 0 for transparency, so you don't have to worry about that. And then, moving on into here, there's two more sections we have. Set new mold defaults means we can tell it what scale we want. Position is something we pass in here to be directly in front of your camera, so if you tell it to add something, it's right there in front of you. You can adjust anything, like we know the rotation to be facing us, but you could do like a plus 90 degrees, or all in degrees, by the way. Rotation, okay, blah, 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 I got those all set there. So rotation, you could add like plus 90 or minus 90 or plus 180 or whatever you need to do to set the rotation of the initial item every time you add it. The other part is set mold form fields. This one tells it which fields on the form when you're editing it in admin mode will show up on the list. So what I'm doing, let me get you in here. If, for example, this box right here, if I right click it, I'm editing the box. these fields on here, when I first added it to a scene, excuse me, sorry. When I first added it to a scene, it uses the new mold defaults. So it will be a 1 by 1 by 1, for example, and 0 for the extra features and settings here, pretty much. And it's in this position in that rotation. Okay, by default, no problem. It's all set right there. But in addition to that, we have set mold form fields. What this does is, first of all, mold position title is this title right up here, edit box, for example. And then box position, box length, box rotation. Notice how it has the word box in each one of those. Well, what I did in here is each one of those have a name, and all you have to do is tell it what your custom mold is, change all those. It can even be this part here. You change that to your item, all in lowercase up here. But then these can be whatever words you need them to be on the different pieces. So you have edit, custom mold name is the actual title of the form. You have the different pieces in here. They're all there. You know what? Since the title is on the top, I'm going to go ahead and put that up on top here. Makes sense, top down. So then you have save and delete buttons. You know, you can tell it what words you want on those. The other part is this hide and show function. You can tell it sections by div that are going to show or hide in here. So for example, a box uses these items. You have this particular stuff here, but let's say I did the height map. This uses the exact same form, but now I have terrain height map. You can change the height map and pick one. You can also use mix maps and bump maps and red texture and green textures and all kinds of cool stuff that you use when you're working in that section. The other part is we have different pieces like the scaling of the texture on the surface and the number of subdivisions and stuff. Each one of these have a section div tag on the form, and you can hide or show depending on what object you're working on. Like here, notice we do not have any of those sections, but we do have covering type, and we have the box texture, we have the box bump image we can upload. So we have a couple different things. And that's, you know, and we can even add sounds. So there's different pieces that we can have with a common object. Okay, then let's see. So we turn off and on each one of those sections. If you're looking for them, go to forms, and then each one has for what we're doing. So in this case, we're working with molds, it's the mold form. If we're working with action zones, it's the action zone form, and so on. Building is when you're creating a new building, and it's the info page. Building shares, the building sharing page, you get the idea. Connecting grids are here, and we also have a couple other areas, dev access and water depth, you know, a couple. You'll be able to find them pretty easy, but these forms are all basically forms that are in admin in this menu over here. So like even this right here is a form for edit, add or edit actions. And when you pick one that you're going to work with, for example, I'm going to add a load zone. Now all of a sudden I have this form loaded for action zones. So that's kind of the flow of how those things work. Now you can open up the mold form, for example, and notice there's all kinds of things. Mold position title, you can change the mold position title. There's the ID. If you want, for example, let's go down past rotation. We have web text. That's if you're doing 3D text or some type of lettering or something. You can use that field. There's other sections here for they add image, the image texture. Or that's actually image and hover image and a click event, on-click event, if I can say that straight, or on-click JavaScript that you want to tell it to run a certain function. Video settings. There's all kinds of sections in here. Tried to think of everything, and every time we add something, if there's a new piece to add, we add it in there. So there's a lot of pieces in there, but all that is in here. You tell it to show or hide which ones you want. Just a helpful hint, if you go to the molds, add mold list, and notice after complete mold, when it finishes that section, we have set new mold defaults, and then after that we have that hide and show section. you can find one similar to what you're doing and copy that section to use it for yours up here. So you can get something close to it that has or shows the same sections you want to do. So if you created, for example, a new version of a cone and it has some different cutouts or whatever you want to do with it, you could easily copy this as the design, put it into the default values here, and then in the next section down below, we have okay, here it is, set mold form fields, and here's all your defaults. By the way, here's the ones that we hide and show by default. Then we have each one of these sections that go through, hey, if I have a cylinder, for example, these are the parts that I show. If I have a cone, here's the ones I would show for this. So I would take a copy of this section, if I did something like a cone, and I could put them in here, and right here, and then just modify them accordingly to be my particular object. So that's how I got this in here to begin with, is I created a default one and then showed you different sections you could show or hide based on what you do. Okay, and that's it for the mold. The same thing happens for coverings, except when you create a custom covering, what you're doing is you're building the material. That's it. We return the material. Oh, it says return mold. That won't work. We want to return the covering. I gotta double check that. I'm certain we returned the covering. Nice to see that that one was there. Okay, add coverings. Oh, basic coverings. We're returning the covering. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so we're returning the covering. Now to work. Okay, so, but there's only two sections in here because we're putting the covering on an existing mold, so there's no reason to scale the mold or anything. We've already done that when we created it to begin with. So all we're doing is getting ready the texture. In this case, I'm showing you how we create a color. If you want, you can come in here and in our different coverings, basic coverings file, here's a wire mesh, wireframe, here's a color, here's glass. I basically colored it and set a certain thing to be my default glass. I'm working on one for a mirror. Here's a covering texture. This one tells it how to use the UV scale and the V scale and the U scale and the V scale and U scale are U offsets. So you can use the offsets and the scaling of the texture on the surface. Here's how we can even combine it with a bump map if you have one. Everything's in here. So you've got some good default coverings. We can even have a color on top of a texture, which is what we do. But you can define any piece you want. And basically we name a couple things. Backface culling has to do with the transparency, seeing the opposite side of something within itself if you have partial transparency objects. Like if I did a globe and I showed the continents but all the water was transparent, you would see the continent on the back side of the globe through where the water would be. That's the kind of stuff that you can do with backface culling and also your opacity settings, your transparencies. Alpha is the opacity. So, and it goes from 0 to 1, but I let you set it on 0 to 100%. And then I do a little calculation in here to make sure that's what that division by 100 is. And so we set the alpha and we get our covering back, and that's how it works. Okay, so we have a number of different ones. Some are related to creating terrain, for example. And there are some that go inline in code. Others will take it off, we'll do it asynchronous. So you can pay attention to that when we're doing them. The coverings often are added asynchronous. Like if I don't want you to wait for a graphic to load to be able to load a covering. Otherwise your animation gets all wiggy and, basically lags. So that's the kind of stuff we do to make sure that stuff works. So use the examples. When you want to create a custom covering, look at some examples of something like what you want to do. I also have directional textures, which align the image around the object this way instead of these two being this way and these two being, rotated 90 degrees. So there's some things you can do with that. I show how to do that. A lot of cool stuff in there. Now the other part is, like I said, we do not have a new covering thing because we're creating new molds and putting coverings on them. So we already have it taken care of in the mold section. So the only thing we have is for the covering, it is part of the mold form. it is something you're putting on the mold. So in this case, we show or hide different sections of the form and also the titles that belong to them or something. We can also close or hide the color selector piece. So like when you're working on something, notice how this color selection thing came up here. By the way, I'm getting a ghost image down here in a smaller degree. I'm going to track that down and figure that out shortly here, because it actually aligns with where I'm moving this, notice. And so something's buggy on that, and I'll figure that one out. But that's just something I got to take a peek at. Okay, so but closing the color selector, for example, for my covering. So if I create a custom one and I don't need that, I can tell it to close it off. You can use the examples one more time in the coverings directory. Basic coverings are your examples. Add covering list is where it creates the initial list of the items that you can add. There are some conditions in here, and you may look at those. Like if it only applies to a terrain, you may say, you know, an if statement in your piece that adds this in here. You may say, see, we have plugins coverings. That's where you can add code telling you what to do. You can tell it, hey, if the shape is terrain, then I want this. Or if it's a plane or a disc, do this. If it's a box, do this. You know, you may have different type of things you need to do based on what type of object it is. Or it may only be available, like if I created a snowman as a shape, I may have a covering that only applies to the snowman. So I could say if shape equals snowman, boom, use this covering. And that's it. I don't even give them any other options. So there's stuff like that you can do. Just letting you know that all is available. It's wide open. I like to open up ideas. I don't like to close them off. Okay, and then action zones, they work exactly like the molds do. You basically create an action zone, which is an area that you walk in that causes an action to trigger. That's why we call them action zones. It's a zone. You can create any shape you want. In this case, I'm pulling it in from the action zone def because that's what gets saved in the database. It reads it back, and this particular piece, it's going to read in what shape it is, and it's going to create, for example, the add mold, which is create a box, basically. In this case, this one's going to be a box by default, but it will add the mold, and it will then rotate it and position it in your scene using this scaling also. So that kind of gives you an idea of how to create an action zone. You can do other things with it, and I'll be giving more examples as we go, because I do have things like I created an action zone that when you walk into it, it loads certain animations. Then in our paintball game, I told it to not only load the different animations to my avatar, but switch over. If he picks up the rifle, I want him to walk holding the rifle instead of the animation that normally has his hands down at the sides. So I started using some of these things and defining how to use them and showing you examples. You can also create your own that uses the function of the core action zone as the base. So for example, here I created a mold def and I got all these values, and then I told it to create a mold to be the box. You can go another path, and instead of all that, you pass what you need to into this function right here, for example, and have it create the load zone just by doing one line of code and returning it back. Then you can add additional things to it so you can build off of a current zone to make it your own custom one. So what I did was I took an animation load zone, so load animation, and basically recreated that, but before I loaded it, I told it which animations I wanted to load when you walk in that zone. Made it real easy. All I had to do was define which animations to load. Became, you know, simple process, and then the animation zone was used to tell it, here's the animations, make sure you have them when you walk in this zone, load them to your avatar, and unload them when you leave. So we took care of all those pieces when we did it. Then, just like the other things, set new action zone defaults. This one didn't have a lot, but we can pull all kinds of things and set them on that form as needed. The other one is, just like we did molds, action zone form fields, set them. You can turn them off or on, you can hide or show different sections as needed. Currently the form has the main box that you're working with, but then also has like an axle. It has for like a hinge, or it can be a slider. I do all kinds of cool stuff with the doors and sliding and different things. So take a look at those other examples, pick one that's like what you want to do, use it as a base, and then build off it as you need to. Have it do whatever you need to do. You can trigger other JavaScript when somebody clicks on it, or whatever you need to do. You can create your own stuff for that. And then this main JavaScript, what this is all these other functions like onClick. When I do onClick, for example, I get the picked mold name. I change it to lowercase, and then I use this function called mold name parts, which will break down that name and look for and identify different pieces. For example, okay, first of all, mold name is the name, but mold index, it'll tell me which index in the array it is. There's also one for which array it is. So you can get the array and the index, and just like here, mold name parts molds, mold name parts mold index, that object right there is object definitions. Go back up to this right here, mold section, and this right here, all of this format of this mold definition, all of these values are now available to you to pull, use in your code. You can do anything you want. You can find out what the parent name is of the parent object. You can find out what the ID is in the database of that particular object. This mold IND opposed to ID, the ID is the definition file in the database. The IND is an index, but it's also the instance. So like if I put two of the same buildings in my scene, or 4 chairs around a table that are the exact same chair, the ID would be the same on all of them, but the index of which one it is would be different. Okay, so you can easily say, hey, index 4 would be the 4th chair. Index, or even if it's index 3 would be the 4th chair because it starts on 0, by the way. Okay, but it's each index of each thing that you add to the scene. So it could be, the 4th chair could be index number 42. But this tells you by the order that it loads it and when it puts it into the queue, into the array, which means it's dynamic. Don't memorize an index and expect it to always be there. Look it up on the values, pull the mold index, which we also give you in just the mold name parts. Find out what that index is right here, and then you can pull this from the actual array itself. And notice that's community molds, building molds, and thing molds. It's one of those 3 arrays. By that, you can get the full definition of everything in it. Makes it real nice and easy. The connecting grid it uses, where it's connected to. The parent action zone behind it, if it has one. The action zone that it's in and when it loads. Each one of these pieces are available to you to use in code. You can check what you want. You can change the opacity of something. You can pull up something. You can change the covering. You can modify things in a scene when you click on it, for example. Anything you want. So the onClick event will tell you what items clicked, and then you get the option of telling it what to do. In this sample that I give you, one of the things you can do is you can have it hold an item. For example, pick up the object when you click on it. So my avatar is going to pick up, in this case, the gun for the paintball game. What I did was, if pick name has this name within it. Now notice that name is in my game. When I created the object, I added that name to the mold name. So that was the piece I'm looking for as the key. I create an offset pattern of position, scaling, and rotation so that when he picks it up, it's facing the right direction. It's in his hand, but it's orientated right. It's not in his hand, it's in front of his hand. It's off-centered just right so that the hand looks like it's holding the trigger and the grip. Then I scale it whatever I want it to be, and I can also rotate it so the gun isn't facing down, it's facing up and forward, for example. Whatever I need it to be by rotation. Then I use that offset. I tell it which piece to connect to. Like in this case, right hand. You can do right hand, left hand, top of head. There's the back. There's the hips. There's the feet. There's all kinds of places you can attach to. There's one in the chest which you can go forward or backwards, so you can have something in front of him, or you can have a backpack on him for all that matters. Okay, so the pick name is the object that you've clicked. This part here, my avatar and instance is my avatar. So that value right there is the name of my avatar in my scene, but it's the avatar of the user who's playing the program. That's who it is. So that's what we're doing. We're telling it when you click on that item, your own avatar, whoever the user is now picking up this object. It's going to go in the right hand, and here's how it's going to be positioned to that right hand. That's how it works. You don't have to do that. You can do anything you want. When you click on an item, it could turn on the lights. You could flip a switch. You could clear it. You can make a sound. It has a doorbell maybe. Anything you want it to be. Each thing you do triggers something in the scene. So basically, you can run a JavaScript no matter what you do. Each piece that you do can trigger something. Once you can trigger JavaScript, it's endless what you can actually make it do. You can do something that's related to the game engine. You can do something that's related to JavaScript outside of it. Anything. Okay, then we have things beyond onClick. There's a whole bunch of them. Think about everything that's in the program. We can check the action zone for like, did you walk inside of a load zone? What do you want to make it do? You can do things like set avatar movement. So I can turn on an animation with my avatar. So like when I picked up the rifle, I wanted there to be a position of him holding the rifle like this as a waiting, ready to shoot the gun. When he was walking, I want him to be walking with the rifle. So you can tell it which pieces to do. You can also check hovers. So you can also find out, did you hover over a particular item? The mold name, does it look like golf ball? You know, you can also break down those names the same way as the other one. Reset hovers. So once you're not hovering, what would you do to put that back? So like if I highlight the golf ball where it lights up or it has a background around it to show you that you can click on it, what do I do when you move the mouse away? I can turn back off that highlighting and outlining or whatever I chose to do. Okay, so that's the kind of stuff you can do. This is just a sample of what you do. Here's where you get the full list. If you look in the code under functions and you look in plugins, WTW plugins class, in here there is a function called, let me back up to the start of it just so you can see where it's at. This function is called get script functions. If you ever forget it, it is, well, I haven't showed you how to tie in the mold or all these different functions and activate them yet, but under functions in your class plugin, it is the same function we're using right here, add script functions. We're telling it on click, I want to run this command. On set new action zone defaults, I want it to run this command, this function. With these perimeters, you know. Well, when you want to know what those functions are that you can tie those into, what this hook name is, then look in here, and each one of them are here. Here's this. This is the hook name. Get script function, render loop, for example. If you want to put something in the game's render loop, just put it right in there. If you want to do the render loop after it initializes the scene, you can put it in this one, and it'll automatically be in the render loop. Both of these put it in the render loop, but they don't necessarily, this one waits for it to load the scene first, so you're not using cycles. You let it do everything it needs to get the scene there first. Plugins, this one, load user settings. So if you have some user settings you've added, you can tell it to load user settings. My avatar animations are loaded. This one tells you when they're loaded so that you can tell it what to do next. You can intercept that and change it. Setup mode close. So like if they're picking their avatar, so the new user comes in, picks an avatar. When it closes that thing, they just picked the avatar, you can plug in some code to work from there. Saved avatar retrieved. So like they come back a second time and it gives them their avatar that they've selected. You can have something happen when they load their avatar. Check action zone trigger. Did somebody walk inside of your box that you put there for an action zone? Is it the person that is using it, or did somebody else walk in the box? Here's an example. I'm standing in a scene, and there's a door. Around it is an action zone that tells it when you walk inside that, your avatar walks inside it, I want the door to open so I can walk through it. Now, picture this. I'm standing in that scene looking towards the door, but I'm not in the action zone. If another avatar walks into the zone, the door still needs to open for them to walk through it. I don't want to see them walk through a closed door. So you can check in that scene, you can find out basically others in zone or if me in zone. You can check both things, and you can even return others in zone so you know that you can say, hey, here it is, I did this thing, and you need to know if others in zone matters, with what you're doing or something. So you can return the value of what happens if it's others in zone. By default, it does if me in zone. Those values, by the way, are passed in your code, so you'll know exactly what they are, what you return from your function, and how it applies to everything it does after that, okay? Check action zone, another version where you can tell it to check an action zone. You can do some additional code, what you want it to do when it checks the action zone. Avatar before create. Okay, if there's anything you need to do to the definition file before it creates it. So if you want to take the definition of what's going to generate your avatar and you need to make changes to it. So if you decide, let's say, I'm going to switch out these animations by default. I'm going to do this, this, and this to the avatar. I'm going to set these colors or whatever it is. Everything's in that definition by the time you get it, and then you can modify it before it actually generates the avatar. So you have a chance of modifying it before it's created into the scene. Then we have on-click, we spoke about. Set avatar movement, so you can set it into different animation patterns. Dispose clean. This is a function where you can tell it, hey, when you dispose something clean, I have a couple extra things you need to do to make sure my objects are completely cleaned out of the scene. Which means if I walk too far away, it needs to disappear. This is the function where you can put your extra cleanup steps. We have things like, okay, this one is one that's generated for us. It's not a get script function, but there's others. Set new action zone defaults. We talked about those. The form fields, which ones you want to turn on or off. Okay, we have return mode list default, web mode list. Open, add new mold, load mold form, set new mold defaults, set new form mold form fields, open mold form. So when you open the mold form, what do you want it to do? Load connecting grids, submit mold form. Is there anything else you need to save when the mold form is saved? Clear edit mode. Coverings. We have check hovers and reset hovers like I showed you. Open color selector. You can tell it to open the color selector or close it. You can tell it what else to do when it opens. That kind of stuff is all part of this. You know what? I think that thing ghost image started when I did this. I better double check that code. That's probably where I got the ghost image. So just so you know. Plugin, set new mold. Set new mold is actually a function that gets used on the admin side while you're making changes to it. So for example, I open up the box, so I'm editing it. I make some changes like what texture I'm going to do. The set new mold tells it to either recreate it using this new definition or modify it in a certain way. So I can tell it, let's say I added a function that says when I click it, spin the box, I can add it to the set new mold function so it'll do it while I'm editing it and I originally create it in admin mode. So it's a good useful time to be able to do those features. The next one is mold queue added. Many times we walk into an area and there are too many objects to load at once in one single frame. So instead of allowing it to say, hey, load all these objects in one frame, as it tells it to load different meshes to the screen or molds, what happens is I put them in a queue, and then for every frame, it will only do so many of them. And it's got a little bit of a catch-all, so that no matter what, it processes them all, but it doesn't do too many in any one frame. That way, what happens is the animation stays regular, you get a nice smooth transition, and pieces are added into your scene on a smooth level. That was the solution that I came up with that allowed me to do it. Of course, there's a bunch of asynchronous stuff going on, but at the same time, this queuing them up allows it to generally put things in each frame, like add another mold per frame kind of thing, or every other frame, or whatever I needed to do in that sequencing and timing to make it run smooth so that my animation doesn't lag while I'm walking around in a scene and things are generating around me. That's what's important there. Okay, so that whole function, those are the ones we've added so far. You can check back here as you request them. I'll add them into this section on the core code, and we'll keep on adding other functions. If you were to take any one of these functions, for example, plugins render loop, and I search for it in the core code, notice you'll see this code that I'm doing here, but you'll also see where it actually sits in the code. This particular one in the core file, plugin render loop. And notice, by looking it up, you can tell this happens before the rest of the core stuff that I told it to do. There's some things that were purposely after the core stuff happens. So just so you know, there's a couple different things like that in place, but you can look up where this piece of code is and what you're telling it to do in any one of these items. Here's plugins render loop after init. So we make sure that the init cycle is complete. We make sure that you have an avatar, it's not null anymore, and setup mode is off. Then the render loop will start those items. So it's like something you wouldn't add to a setup mode. Okay, which is most of the stuff, by the way. Okay, so that just gives you a couple ideas how you can find items, and you can look them up in the code, see the cross-reference, and how to work with them. Okay, so now that we've gone through those, I'm going to take about a 5-minute break, and I'll be back with you. We're going to continue on this path, and I'm going to show you the connect section and the handlers with their functions, just so we can kind of piece it all together in all the places. So I will be right back, and then we'll finish this out. Okay, I'm back and here we go, part 2. Yeah, cranking on right through this, and there's some things. Before I move to connect and handlers, let's finish up a couple things here. Notice how we have this section in here. This is the class plugin. When we write code in JavaScript, no matter what it is, if it's a mold, if it's a action zone, if it's a covering, what we do is, just like I was talking to you about, we have all those different pieces in the code where we can tie them in. And we use the, where's the, if I can see it here, class plugins. We define which area it's going to be in. Well, the other part of that is, once we decide which one we want it to be in, there's a couple things. First of all, each script that we take has to have a reference to it in the code to tell it to run this script. So in this case, we turn on these particular scripts. The next piece is, after we have those on, here's the add script functions. So if I want to on-click event, then I need to basically take off the, the comment, and now we have an on-click event, and this would be our plugin name and the on-click, and then the pick name. See, this matches up exactly with this part in here. It's the class name, the on-click, and the pick name. So that's where you pull those values, and notice that that lines up once again with, over here we have the on-click event. And notice for each one of these, by the way, one thing I'll add is that each one of these have specific parameters that are passed, like in this case, mold name and shape. This one's mold name, shape, and color type. And then there's mold name, mold. There's, each one of them has different things. You basically just need to look at whatever function it is and then see what items are available for that particular item. So easy enough. You can look it up in here. I'll publish this out to, I'll make sure we document all this stuff too. I've been adding the documentation as we go and different pieces to it, but I'll continue to add them in. So basically we come in here and we tell it which one we want to be available. Now that is being used in the code. So if I click on something, your function is running and it is part of the code. That's how we change them up, that's how we add them, and here's some of the values, just giving you an idea of how they work. Then we have, for example, a mold. You have your mold, add mold def. I showed you how to do that. And I showed you how we can add the mold defaults and new mold defaults, and also set the form fields. Excuse me, same thing for the custom action zone. We have the new action zone and the action zone form fields. Then we have a covering, and we have the form fields for coverings that are part of the mold form, by the way. And I did say this stuff over here, so in the text you'll see a lot of this stuff available in this section also. Set custom action zones, custom covering defaults, and show hide mold form fields as needed. Create the following list of coverings. See, I did it in some places, but I didn't update that name right there. Okay, so, and by the way, I will be updating this on the plugins list when we get done today, so, or later today. So by the time I get all this little stuff done, then I'll go ahead and do that. So you can always get the latest and greatest off of GitHub. Just remember GitHub, HTTP 3D, and then you've got WalkTheWeb, you've got the plugin template, you have all the other goodies. All the things and the plugins that I work on while I'm streaming, I'm putting them out there so you can see those as examples also. Some of them need some work, some are, farther along than others, but if you watch the stream, you'll know which ones are which. Okay, the template is always going to be the best reference. The other ones are just to kind of get more ideas of how to do things or examples. Okay, now there's two other pieces here. Connect. The Connect directory, here's the deal. The Connect directory, if you look in our Connect directory here, it is a way that I can say, here's an action zone, or here's the action zones that I need to load, and I can tell it by certain fields, and I can pull certain data that I would want to bring into a scene. Right now, by default, it only lets you bring them into your own scene. But with permissions, we can actually open up that gap, because see right here, we're telling it to only use our own domain name as the header as we do this stuff. But when we tell it to be everybody, or if we tell it which ones are allowed to use our item, that's what's going to be returned in this particular place. So we'll be changing that up as we go, as I write the code to do those pieces. But at the same time, it's only going to share with the ones that we give permission to view our item and use it in their scenes. Okay, so with that said, we have action zones, we have avatars, we have buildings, we have communities, we have molds of different items, we have our own dashboard, we have molds by web ID, we have uploaded files, so your textures, your images that go on buttons, or whatever you want to do. All that stuff is here. Your user data, the stuff we would share, not everything. User access, so if you have access to a site, or you've given extra permissions to somebody on their on your site or something, that stuff goes. Web aliases tell you the paths that you can browse. So these different things are all available here. Well, what we do is, if you look at any one of these files, first of all, get val is basically $_get. So but it has, sometimes they have little correcting things or make sure that the stuff is there. Also, this format that I use for this function is, this is the name of the field you're trying to get, or the name of the value. And then this is the default value if that didn't have a value. So like here, we connect in grid IND. If it wasn't passed, it gives it a -1. That's just a little quick way of reading them in. Then down here, WTW Connect is the class for all the Connect files. It's loaded right here, and you get the Connect class. What happens in here is I tell it, using a query, to go get something out of the database, and then basically I write my header, and then I go through that query, the results of that query, which are put in there right there, and I create the array of values that it's going to return. So, and in this case, I actually do another query within a query, so that's probably not the best example, but notice I create the different arrays with their values out of the database, out of the array that gets returned from the database. And it pieces all back together so that you get an action zone. And this format right here, by the way, is the exact same format that if you looked it up as the new action zone in here, for example, in the object definitions file. It is the same structure. So the connect files and the object definitions are in sync with each other. They do fill out the exact same values as they build the arrays of return values for the objects of anything that we're creating. Okay, so let's see. And basically that gets returned and gets encoded in JSON and returns the values. So that's how we're getting our values. And then we have places in our code that will call these functions, these connect files, and it will bring them back. Now, the one thing I wanted to show you is this. In this connect directory, that's where all of the stuff is going to go when we create something that gets read from one server to another. Okay, with that in mind, the other part of that is that means these pieces in here, if it's not in this directory, well, like your plugin isn't in this directory, we needed to do something else. But there's another couple little tricks about the plugin that I wanted to make it simple for everybody to do this. So here's what I did. I created a plugins class, obviously, which you've already seen using the other pieces. But in the init, when you first browse the website, one of the things I do is I double check the path that you're coming in under. So I'm going to look in this file and I'm going to find the place where it finds this. Next. We're almost there. I guess I could have said handlers too. That does the same thing. Am I missing it? Let me see. Find next. I know we got connecting grids. We have a lot of things that say the word connect. Would have been better off looking for the word handlers. Let me see. We'll look for handler. Case handler. There it is. Should have looked through that one first. Okay, so what happens is when it first reads the file as the index.php file. Okay, so this is in the root code. When it comes across here, and this also works in the, this works in both. So no matter what, when you go to the index.php or the admin PHP file, it looks to see if you're on the index page or the admin page. And if the next directory up after that, the first directory is the connect folder, then what I do is I load the plugin loader, which is the right there, and I tell it to run the, if it's connect, I tell it to load the plugin loader, and then I tell it to load connect URL, which means it reads from the path, and then it goes in, and I'll show you. It includes your file as part of the core. So as part of that folder. So you get the functions class WTW or database right in here. It's looking for the folder and it looks for your file for your plugin. It looks for your connect files right here. And for each connect file for when it finds a connect file, it will automatically run that particular file, require once. So it loads it in that folder. So what all that said, that was very confusing even as I said it. Basically, what that means is if you put a file in your connect folder here, for example, this code right here, what'll happen is the core website will act as if it's underneath this connect folder. But the good part is not only does it do that, but it also wraps it with the with this connect class. So you have the plugin loader class already loaded, and you have the WTW connect class already loaded. You have the database class. You have everything you need. So once you get to this point, instead of like these files, notice how we had to require once and we included a file up here to even get started. On yours, you don't have to do that. And not only can you get the connect class, but you can also get your own plugin class. So if you created something as part of your plugin class, your functions, you can read it and use it from in here. Okay, so that's what that means. It's part of your own plugin class. Okay, so with that said, let's see, what do we have now? We have so that's the plugin, that's the connect class. So you can create your own functions. You can tell it what to return. For in this case, we do a field ID, field name, protected name, and a field URL. That's just a sample of a sample database fields. Okay, And that's what's going to be returned by this JSON the same way we do our own classes like we did in the action zones. The only difference is you didn't have to include a file up on top because it's already been wrapped up before your file even gets read. Okay, handlers. This is the next section. In here, where I also showed you how we have... Let me get back to that page. We were doing the W2W init session. It checks to see if connect is the first thing. The other thing it checks to see if it's core and functions, that's fine, but handlers. If it sees that that directory is core and then handlers, we tell it to load a handler class, and this particular one will do anything as if it's in this handler folder. So when you put something in this handler folder here, it executes as if it's in the core handlers file here. That's the other trick about this thing. Because we do it as a includes. So that's why it works that way. So you can actually be part of the handlers. Now, what are handlers? When we work in our code, so you're coming in here and you edit this box and you tell it, I want to save this box. What happens is we do not want to post back this whole page. We want to do a partial page post back, which means I want to take the values in this form up here and I want to asynchronously, so it doesn't interrupt my scene, I want to take another thread, open up this connection, hit this handler, pass the data to it, have it open up the database asynchronously, make the changes in the database, and then come back to me if there's new data to return. If not, just finish out itself. So basically what it's doing is it's going over there and it's finishing out, writing back and forth to the database. So if you needed data in your scene, you could use a handler to get that data and bring it in the scene on the fly. It's asynchronous. It doesn't interfere with what's currently running. You just have to use the right triggers of when to pull it and when to add it to your scene and the process that we created. We've already done this in many cases, so I'll show you some examples as we go. But basically, it's a way of taking something, setting it up to, for example, okay, save box. Let me show you. I'm going to dig here. I'm going to take, we've got this save box button right here. In it, it does the submit mold form. That's the one I'm looking for. Submit mold form. We'll go back into our core code and I'm going to find submit mold form. I'm putting a space equal sign after it so I don't find every place I used it, but only the mold definition for it. There's a class, but then notice this one right here, submit mold form. Okay, if I submit this mold form, right here is such a request. And what I'm doing is this. The request, I set up an array of values that I'm going to pass to my request. Okay. Then I tell it what handler to use on my post JSON. Post JSON then does the asynchronous call. It uses this handler, which tells it which one to use. You would still use /core/handlers and then put the name of your handler right here. zRequest is passing this data, which treats it as form fields. And once it passes that and executes it, this looks for a response back, and then I can tell it what to do based on that response if there's anything I need to do. So let's say I'm telling it to get data and then I want to bring it back into the scene. This is where I would code what happens, or pass it to a function that does it or whatever, but you can tell it what you want to do with that data when it comes back. So the idea is this: keep the active scene animation running the whole time you're doing things, but at the same time, at the same time, you need to be able to pass data back and forth to the scene. So in theory, this is what we do. When you tell it to change something, I immediately change it in the scene. You get immediate response. Everything in JavaScript tells it, change it right now. But if you were to reload the scene, it needs to be in the database so I know how to reload it. So what it does is changes the scene, everything's good for you, and then behind the scenes, the synchronous, I tell it to go off on another path, go to this handler, save this data to the database, and if there's things I need to bring back, I bring them back. Otherwise, I'm done with that process. That's what I'm doing. Doesn't interfere with the animation that way, and if you reload the scene, it's already been saved. Okay, so with that, we run that JavaScript, that calls this handler file, and the handler file does the process. It takes, first thing we did was, I'm reading in the data, JSON decode. I'm bringing in whatever that request was from here. So this Z request that I passed, here's the file that I open, and then the Z request. In my case, I've got a custom one, so I take that Z request, and then I say, this is telling it, I'm going to call a function. So this function that I'm passing right here, function, is telling me which of these cases to run. So I can make one handler file pull all the action zones. I can make it save an action zone. I can make it, go in and tweak something, whatever I need it to do. I can have it go in there and do different stuff, save something, or delete something, or update something, or replace, or insert a new record, or anything you need it to do, or retrieve different data back. Then the response data, like in this case, get action zones. I shouldn't even call it that. Technically, it's the function, so it's whatever the function's called. I'm going to say, we'll call that get sample data. We'll get sample data, and this will be save sample data, just because it's not an action zone. So we've modified the names of the functions that it calls, no big deal. Okay, so from here, this one goes to this function, which is class functions, and it's going to run get sample. Here's my past value that I sent in here. Here's how it gets the sample of data, whatever it's going to be. It returns the response, and then in here, when it returns that response, it gets signed to response, gets wrapped up in an encoder with a header on the page, and basically gets returned as JSON data. In this other case, save sample data, I pass in the values. They get read in, each one, just like it's a get post, like a posted form. Here's the form field that I'm looking for, and here's the default value if I didn't have it set. And basically, comes in here. I go to save sample, which, if you look in your class functions, there's one called save sample. Passes two values. I do a sample query to my plugins. Query to the table. Notice I use the prefix on the table name of whatever the value is from the, that will be automatically filled in for you. So you just have to say the table name, because in case they used a different prefix or something, you're still safe. Set the field name equals to this, where field equals this. Just showed you an example. You can do anything you need to. Success equals true, just so that I know when I bring it back, was it true or false? In here, if that, which is false, then I can respond with error array in the array saying could not save sample data. And so we would have some type of response in the S error. I can even make the value return else. I could do an else statement here. Else error is blank. I could do that very easily right here. You can even add it here. So if I just wanted S error equals blank, I could just go right here. S error equals blank, oops, like that. And now we have a default value of there is no error unless this happens. And in this one, there's no S error because we overrode the whole thing with this value. So unless we return it from here with part of the values of get sample, maybe we add it onto here if we needed to. So just there's a couple ways you can do that. Okay, so that's just a couple different pieces. Gives you an idea. S error is blank. Boom, you're ready to go. You've updated the data in the database and function's over. This response that you have in these errors, they get read by the calling code. So right here, that is the response. That's why I was very careful of how to put those in. You JSON parse it. Now you can call them by each individual piece, which would mean z response dot response dot error. I could tell it to spit that out on the page or something. That would be the name of the error field right there. So I'm not going to add it in the code there. We don't need it, but that's how you would reference that value that gets put into serror. So it's response.serror, and that gives you this value of what's here, or the blank if it didn't have an error. Okay, so those are handlers and connect files. Not quite ready to do the next part, because the next things I'm going to be adding into here, just so you know, are going to be the areas of the form field. So, like if you have a mold and you need a section in here to do something custom to a particular mold, then I will automatically give you an area where you can add like a sample of an area, type that in there, and basically it gets included on this page. And by default, it's also shut off for everybody else. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to need to do. Okay, so we'll do some of those things for this area, and we'll also make sure you can add items into the menus down here. Because let's say you came up with an item like this multiplayer settings. That wasn't here by default in the core product. That's actually added by this multiplayer plugin right here. So I'm going to take the piece that does, and I'm going to put it into the code up here, and it'll be part of the sample, so that you'll be able to add your own pieces into the menu, your own menu items, your own pieces underneath it, whatever you need it to do. Okay, so you'll have access to that through the plugins. Okay, if there's no questions, that should take care of putting the different pieces in place for the parts we've done so far. You have connect, you have handlers, and that allows you to hook into the JavaScript code and create your own items and place them into the scenes. Really cool stuff here, really cool. Like I said, we'll work on some menu items next, and we'll keep adding pieces into this template. You can download the template at github.com/http3d. There's the template and also WalkTheWeb code. You can run your own instance of WalkTheWeb and check out all the different parts. It's all open source, all these things that I'm doing, so help yourselves, check it out, and, you know, it's all good. So that concludes what I'm going to be doing this morning, and if you want to reach me and I'm not here, find me on Discord. Check out my, walktheweb.tv. On that page, you'll see there's a link to Discord. Join us on there. Ask me questions anytime, day or night. If I'm awake, I'll answer for most cases. So yeah, definitely hit me up on there. Join us in the Discord. If you have other questions, there's other people there that will also help you. So definitely join in, find me on Discord, and let's build those plugins. Let's build some things. Let's create 3D internet. We're talking about the next 3D internet cities. So yes. Thanks, Bocus. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. And Bocus. And yeah, thanks for hanging out with me today. I appreciate it. And I'll see you in Discord.